I'm surrounded by people.
Watch yourself.
I like what your mom said. People are people-y.
No, it's very people-y out.
Yes, it's very people-y out.
Where the people are.
Well, people could be people.
Weird.
When Ariel sang that song, she did not know what people were like.
What song?
The I want to be where the people are.
Wrong.
That's funny. Yes, you do. That's what eternity looks like. People.
They're
Dang it, man.
Jesus people.
No.
Thought I was going to get lucky.
With.
I don't know.
How are you going to do your thingamajig?
Oh, welcome back to Breaking Woke Podcast. Join us for another episode. And we are all now back.
Oh my gosh, but they all left.
Yeah, they're all gone.
I don't even like opera music.
Was that opera? I thought that was a Catholic thingamajig.
Ave Maria? I think it's opera.
I think it was just a cat screaming in the alley.
Ouch.
Shut through the heart when
Oh,
you're too late.
To blame. Anyway.
Okay, boomer.
Okay.
Just kidding.
He's not a
And
boomer.
this episode will be on honor.
We have a doozy of an episode today. Honestly, I am a little surprised we have not done this episode yet on our stinking education system.
Well, it's going to start today. I'm Pep Waples.
I'm Gavin Waples. Who are you two?
Mom Waples.
Mom
Sister
Waples.
Waples.
Sister Waples.
And we are Shifting Culture.
And Breaking Woke.
The Spirit of the Lord says, do you feel the winds of change? For I am releasing my hand, my anointing, that shall break the yoke of woke.
And let the games begin.
Begin. You know, it's funny when you came to me with this idea about this episode, I thought, well, we kind of already covered it, but we really haven't.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't delved into, this on how Baal, Ishtar, Moloch have affected the education system and what its purposes was. One of the things we need to remember when we talk about any of these subjects is that this is a spiritual war.
Right.
But even in a spiritual war, there are natural things that we have to do. And so hopefully in this episode, what comes out is not just pointing out wrongs and things that are sick about the education society, but hopefully we can prompt you to be able to, do something to change it, to do something that would, in the natural, participate in the spiritual battle. And so that's kind of what we're aiming for in this. We'll just point out what's going on. So tell me, Gavin, what you said, that quote from Rockefeller.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, what I thought is interesting, so it's fun. It's crazy that we're getting right into this, but
we have to.
We have a lot to get to, so we might as well. If any of you know who John D. Rockefeller is, he's dead now, a very, very wealthy man from back in like the early 1900s.
But his family...
1900s.
Yeah, the Rockefeller
1900s.
name still lives on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so does their foundation, their influence, their...
Monopoly.
Their
Because
monopoly.
of how much wealth they had back in the day. Right?
Right.
So I didn't know this, but John D. Rockefeller apparently founded the General Education Board, which I'm looking up exactly what their roles are. General Education. Can't spell again. Board.
This is the effects of education. Can't even spell it.
Why we are doing an episode on education and woke effectiveness on the education system. We have an example.
Okay,
right
the
here.
General Board of Education is a private organization that supported education in the United States with a focus on South and education of black people. That's interesting. Provides grants for colleges, universities, scholarships, and fellowships. So basically, it's the money. It's where the money comes from.
Right.
Makes sense from a
That's
Rockefeller.
agriculture, public schools, accounting, fundraising, everything. It was established in 1903 by John D. Rockefeller, who donated $1 million to the organization. The Rockefeller family eventually gave $180 million to fund the GEB, the General Education Board. It was closed in 1964 after nearly spending all of its money. But it's interesting is somebody who puts that much money into education has a very interesting view on education. This is a direct quote from Mr. Rockefeller regarding education, is that I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. Which makes sense coming from a guy that made all his money off the back of dumb people that just wanted to work for money, you know? I mean, that's a little bit ridiculous. You know, you're not no longer, whereas like in Greek culture, this is like the great cultures of the age, Roman culture, Greek, like they had a lot of focus on philosophy in their education and the betterment of the human mind. The Rockefeller tried to steer education more towards a generation of simple laborers, people that could be dumbed down and easily controlled. Not that laborers are dumb, but if that's all you're taught, that's all you know, you're just going to work because that's all you know.
Well, what he did was he generated slaves.
Yes.
You know, and that's the whole idea of even what Bale did. You know, Bale was working for the system, and you know, Rockefeller, you could say, was a leader of the system and a modern day slave. I wouldn't say owner, but creator of a slave mentality. You know, that's what we have today. Everyone goes to work, and you know, they basically work to retirement. You know, and that's it. That's what they're working to retirement. And if you look at a lot of the statistics, many people that within 5 years, there are a lot of people that after retirement are dead. They die within 5 years of retirement. You know, because the education system has just created a slave and not somebody who's a free thinker and wants to advance the kingdom. You know, the way God set us up as people and individuals is he gave us gifts, and then our gifts were supposed to edify and build up other people. Well, now when you've got someone who just basically wants a slave, now the gift isn't coming out. The gift isn't helping people. It's just someone who's working for the dollar, which in turn is serving the system of Baal.
Right, precisely.
Well, even with the side of working just to get to retirement, you're starting at ages like 20 just to get to retirement. At the end of it, you're working to end. Like you're not working to do the best that you can, you're working to finish. Whereas it's the same thing in school. You're learning to just pass a test or to get by, not learning to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm graduating in May and I don't remember half the stuff that I learned years ago.
Right. And that's how most kids are. Most kids, they know how to work the system. They don't know anything about what goes on in the world. They don't know anything about how the world works, how even our own system of government works. They don't even know the 3 branches of government. They don't understand how to get a job, how to pay their taxes. They don't understand how to apply math or even basic English skills. Even by the time they're a senior, they can't spell, they can't type. They don't use capital letters in anything that they do or punctuation of any kind. It's because they know how to make you hear what you want to hear.
And that goes again to Baal and Ishtar. Okay, I know I'm just basically, all I'm trying to do in this, when I say this kind of stuff, is tie it to the spiritual aspect that, you know, we're at war with. Because Baal and Ishtar, Baal, one of his jobs was to alter truth. And what better way than to get in control, excuse me, of an education system and start making a truth of your own. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what's happening in our education system now. We have people now that think that putting pornography type material in the school is, you know, part of our Constitution freedoms of, you know, art and entertainment and free speech.
Mm-hmm. I remember the first time I actually came across something like that, and it wasn't it wasn't the LGBTQ stuff at this point, but I was in just a small town middle school, and I remember I was flipping through some magazines in like history class or whatever, because I was one of the ones that finished their homework early, so they're like, well, okay, read a book, you know. That's exactly what happened. And so I just grabbed the nearest magazine I found that looked semi-interesting, and it was something about ancient Rome or Greece or one of those ancient cultures. And I'm flipping through this book, and, you know, da-da-da-da-da, and all of a sudden there's this statue of a naked lady, basically, like breasts out and everything. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't think I was supposed to see that. Are we even supposed to have this? Like, I'm in 5th grade right now. So I went up and I showed my classroom teacher about it. I remember this vividly because I was so shocked. Like, I went up and showed her, I'm like, hey, oh no, that's what it was. It wasn't a statue. It was a statue on a previous page, and then the next, it was a different page, like 3 pages later. It was just a full naked lady, but they were painted. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's a human. Like, that's not just a statue. That's a person. Like, I was shocked at the statue, and then I was like, oh my gosh, the person is what made me go show the teacher. And I'm like, okay, hey, look at this. I mean, I'm in 5th grade. I don't think this is supposed to be. I don't think I was supposed to see this. Should we get rid of this book or something? And she looks at me with the most disgusted look on her face, and she's like, that is art. Now you go put that back and you're going to read it. Like, legitimately, and that wasn't the exact quote, but that was what she said. She's like, you're going to look at that, basically, and you're going to appreciate it as art. Like, she told me what I was going to do. I was just like...
So we introduce pornography in the name of art.
Yeah.
You know, that is Ishtar right there. I mean, it's an alteration. It started out with an alteration of truth from Baal. You know, now you're getting, you know, truth, your truth, my truth in the education system. And now, well, my truth is this is art. It's not pornography anymore. It becomes art.
Right.
And so now any 5th grader, 3rd grader, whoever can look at it. You know, and the reason we're even talking about this is because we have to make changes in the minds of people so that changes are made in the system. Mm-hmm. You know, thinking about this, you know, I've you know, I was talking to Brandy here the other night, you know, just about how, you know, even starting the podcast and doing things that we're doing, you know, I've often questioned, you know, what am I doing? But I go back to the words that were given to me and part of this ministry. You know, one of the words that hit me was when we went down to Tulsa, and I was in that Mario Murillo meeting, and the Lord spoke to me and he said, I want you to break the yoke of woke on this generation, wage a war on woke. I had no idea what that was. I had no idea what that meant. The only thing we had at the time was a political movement of the Black Lives Matter and the LGBTQ. I had no idea what it looked like. And so now here we are, you know, you look at what you see is happening in the education system, in our monetary system, it's everywhere. It is so massive that you're like, where do I even start? You know, and that's why, you know, I'm seeing now what we're doing with the podcast, you know, and something that was hit me today was, you know, in contemplating what we're doing and looking at this education system and how big it is and how bad the culture is and how massive it is. And this thought hit me was a teenager took down a giant. You know, so the problem is massive, but David took down Goliath. Mm-hmm. We watched an entire system of Egypt be destroyed in the whole system brought down in one day as God brought his people through the water. God did it. So the whole purpose of bringing all of this stuff out, if we can get ourselves back to God and God say, okay, here's what you need to do individually. It's an individual thing, which then in turn changes the whole system. So like as a parent, you know, before we even had knowledge of woke or anything like that, you know, Brandy had talked about homeschooling the kids, you know, and it wasn't because, we knew what, you know, here's this woke system and we know what's going on. And, you know, it was just, there was something stirred in her, you know. So why don't you talk about that? Why did you even think about educating through homeschooling?
I actually was homeschooled a little bit, obviously. Maybe it's not obvious to you.
I was going to say, obviously?
I mean, for me, it was obvious.
Is that apparent?
It was so apparent.
You tweak once in a while?
Wow.
It was socially awkward.
Gavin is married to someone who's homeschooled their whole life. So you might want to stop talking.
Anyway,
I'll pay for that later.
the point I was trying to make in that was I was homeschooled and hated every minute of it.
Oh.
And then obviously again, I was put in Christian school. That was also awful. And so when I had kids, I didn't have kids with the intention of homeschooling. We're getting to that age, and I had that unction that I need to homeschool. And I did not want to do that because I hated it. But
Okay, let me pause here for a second, because you said you had that unction, and that's the whole point of why we're trying to do this. Is we've got to get people getting back to God in the decision-making process. And when you're talking about this unction, we're talking about, because as a Christian, we know this, that God resides on the inside of us. So then there's a prompting of God to do it a different way. And I think that's what I think people need to see, is there's a prompting of God in you. There was an unction that was a prompting of God, and you had to actually obey that in order for things to go differently. Otherwise, we could have just said, "Oh, we're just going to put our kids in public school." So I guess I'd want to bring out the fact that when you said you had an unction,
I had a thought.
it was a thought, but it was a deeper.
But it was not just there was a thought with a seriousness involved,
Yeah.
if you will.
Almost
And-
a conviction, kind of.
Well, not only that, think about it. She hated the idea of it.
It was not me.
It was. That's how you could
It was
tell.
definitely
wasn't-
not a Brandy thought
That doesn't
process.
mean if you hate the idea that comes to your head that means that you're supposed to do it, though.
No, but
Right.
God brought. I mean, she had a thought
Right.
pattern that was going one way, and then all of a sudden there was a contrary thought pattern. Where did that come from? You know, and so that's the point I'm trying to make here is, you know, how are we? We've got to recognize God in our lives and how God's going to start taking us in another direction. That's how we take down this giant. That's how we turn this big ship. That's how we take Egypt and drown it in the water. And so every person, you know, I know this seemed like a weird place to stop, but I wanted people to understand, well, if I'm going to follow God, what does that look like? You know, and for you, it was an unction. Anyway.
Yeah. And I'm not one who believes that every person should homeschool. I don't believe that. I don't believe there's one way. And so the thought process came to me that I should homeschool. And with that thought process came the fact that I realized that the first few years of a kid's life was very crucial in developing their character, their moral standing, just the structure of how biblically they should live their lives. And I knew if I put them into public school, that they would have 8 hours with a teacher that was structuring them in a way that I did not necessarily agree with for their younger years. So my plan was only to go till, I told my kids, as soon as you know more than I do, I'm done. So in first grade, we quit.
Not true.
For me, yeah.
That is not true. You did not quit in first grade.
Yeah, I went
Yeah.
to public school in second grade.
Oh, well, then that even highlights what you're saying. Because I was homeschooled until fifth
Fourth.
grade. Fifth grade was the first grade that I was in public school.
I thought I put you in fourth grade, fifth grade. Okay.
Nope, it was fifth grade. Because I remember my first public school teacher.
Oh, yeah, because it was fifth and sixth, and I pulled you in seventh.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. But it's interesting because even the way that we were put in from homeschooling, like I remember from the place I was at, I was able to, like there were some things that were presented to me and I didn't know how to react to them. And so I kind of just took it because I had never been like the art thing before. Or, but then there were other things that I'm like, oh, well, no, now I know that's not true. And I just overrode it. Like certain ways they do math, there was like 2 things that I was like, okay, well, that's stupid, so I'm going to do it my way. And then I proved it. And then science, of course, because they spring from the evolutionary perspective. And which I'll come back to that, but like the sun is causing global warming. It's going to die, or we're going to
sun's
die
gonna
in
burn
20
out.
years. You know, yeah, all that stuff. And so there was stuff like that where I'm like, that's weird. That doesn't make sense from what I've already learned. But then you have Riley, who started like 3
Second,
years
third,
younger.
and fourth grade was the grades I was in public school until I went back to homeschool.
Right. And the public
And
education
there were reasons
system.
why we pulled you.
Yeah, I was becoming dumber. I couldn't do simple multiplication in fourth grade.
Yeah, but that's not because you're dumb. That was because you weren't educated.
Potato.
People didn't teach her. It's not that she's dumb. The problem is you weren't being told how to do certain things.
Well, even in 4th grade, we had 2 kids that would disrupt the whole class. And you couldn't learn a thing because we had 2 teachers in our class who would put both the teachers would put their attention on the 2 kids. So the rest of the kids just sat there for 30 minutes waiting to be taught again, and then nobody learned anything that whole day.
Yeah. And not only that, there were things that you were told were wrong that was right, or right that was wrong even. Like, remember, like, there was the one day where you were playing Cowboys and Indians.
Oh, yes. And that is the reality. I mean, anyway. So she came home because the reason I homeschooled, back to the point of it, was because I wanted to instill into my kids a solid base of right and wrong. They were not going to be spiritual giants. I wasn't looking to homeschool them from know all the stories of the Bible and know natural issues. Right? School is reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's what I believe school is designed to be, and everything else should be tweaked. So that's what I put them in school, and the goal was to set them with a basic, when I put them into the lion's den, if you will, they would have, like Gavin, taking his book up to the teacher saying, this is wrong. Like, this shouldn't be, right? Nobody does that today. Because it's art, it's whatever, right? Or it's just normal. But I'm thankful that he did that because it was instilled into him when he was younger. What was the question? Where was I going with this?
When
The Cowboys and Indians.
it was over Thanksgiving, and we had a Thanksgiving party, and we were us as kids,
In school, right?
In school, we were doing Indian war cries and stuff before we were getting down to our party and that stuff. So
Recess hours, right?
I don't remember exactly.
Whatever. Outside.
So she comes home after school and she tells me. That's kind of how it went, right?
Yeah, because she got in trouble on the playground because they said you shouldn't be doing that. That's disrespectful.
Yeah, and so I'm like, Riley, that's not disrespectful. You're just playing. That is typical. They would do this in the movies, things like that. Oh my gosh, she was no, Mom, it is wrong. You cannot do it. And the only reason she came up with this idea is because a teacher was so bold, and so her opinion became law in Riley's mind over her mother's. And I was like, and it wasn't the fact that she trusted a teacher and she had an opinion that the teacher had. It was that when I corrected her, she still went with the teacher's opinion. And when I seen that, I'm like, we're changing this. And so I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We lived in a double-wide trailer house at that time. And so you could literally run around the kitchen, around the living room, through the hallway of the bedrooms, into a bathroom, laundry room, and back around to the kitchen. So it literally made a full loop with all the doors and stuff open. And so I'm like, we're going to run, and we're going to do the we're going as loud as we can. Yep. And we're running. Oh my gosh. Tears, torment. No, Mom. I'm like, you're going to do it. And we're not going to stop until you're doing it. And you're going to do it with a full, like intentional. So the first time around, it was crying and she's just making the noise because her mouth is hitting her crying. So we get one loop around and she's still doing. I'm like, by that, you were with us too at that time, right?
I was there. I was, in fact, watching this when she did that. I was so angry, not at her, but at the fact that all of a sudden I saw fear in my child, and I saw disobedience toward the parents, towards you, and I knew where that came from. Now I couldn't have told you today or until today that was Baal, Ishtar, Moloch, and really that is. Because Baal is pulling people away from God, destroying this whole dark trinity is designed to tear down the family unit, to tear down a country, to get them completely away from God and destroy them. And we were in the middle of it without knowing what it is. And it angered me when I saw it, because generating that fear leads to the control of Moloch, which is death. He has zero disregard for life at all. And that's when you start implanting fear in, now that's the phase where Moloch starts to come in, because fear will lead to death.
Let's come back to that, because I think we both actually have some really power hit. Anyways, continue the story. And we'll come back.
Yeah, so I was mad. I'm participating.
Yeah, so basically, to end the story, it doesn't need to be a super long story. The fact is we did it probably 3 more times before she finally, whatever was in her, that fear or that the holding the teacher's opinion above her parents' opinion broke in her, and you could see when it broke, because then her attitude changed, her demonstration changed, her run changed, her enjoyment changed. And once we got to that point, it wasn't that I was going to make her be an Indian for the next 3 days. It was a point of I seen in her what education had taken and was implanting something that was not truth, that she was eating hook, line, and sinker. And as a parent, with the wisdom of the Spirit of God, it literally broke in her.
And you can just hear people being like, "Oh, that's so mean to do to your kid," making them they're even crying, and people when their kids cry, they coddle them and they're like, "Oh, it's okay, like we don't have to do this anymore," like that sort of thing. But you gotta understand, I barely remember it. It did not traumatize me. Like, I think I can remember some of it, but I don't really remember it all that much. And I think I even went back to school like the next day or something, and out of spite, which is probably not good. But out of spite, I went back to school.
I remember that, actually.
I did?
Yeah, I remember you were spiteful.
Out of spite, I just went back to school the next day and played Cowboys and Indians with my friends.
But I don't think you got in trouble that time, did you?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
Well, see-
they quit after your first little bit of resistance.
And see, that to me, I mean, when we talk about something broke, that is the spiritual aspect of, we're in a spiritual battle. When we saw that, as my microphone.
You need the
can-
microphone.
You need to tighten
Well, yeah. But anyway, when we saw that, it was definitely a spiritual fight, and it was something that spiritually was broken off of our child. We couldn't. I'm not trying to be over. I'm talking about after the fact.
There was
In
no
the moment,
clouds or
right.
it was, you could literally see the change internally.
Right. I'm not trying to be, in the moment we're like, oh yeah, this is so spiritual. No,
No.
we were just being parents. In retrospect, in the knowledge that we have right now, and the things that we've studied and seen, now I can say, oh yeah, that's what that was. That's why we're talking about it today. This is why it's important that as a parent, you actually confront some things, not only in your kids, but even when we got through the homeschool part of things. My microphone's giving me fits here. Anyway, when we got through the homeschool part of things, and our kids went back into education, we had to confront not just moments, but even thought patterns that were given to us by individuals, teachers, principals. So mention that too, because I mean that's, because I'm talking about, if we're going to break woke and change culture, we can't just sit back and be passive and do nothing.
Right. No, true. Their teachers knew who I was. I went to every parent-teacher thing, even though my kids all had straight A's. I mean, my kids never had issues in school as far as grade-wise, other than when I pulled Riley because of that issue.
But that wasn't even her fault, was the thing.
No, it was not her fault. But she's going. You were in 4th grade. 5th grade.
You pulled me
4th grade.
Like I went to school 4th grade. 5th grade was when I went into.
Okay, so at the end of
homeschool.
4th grade, she did not even know her multiplication tables, which that's insane. And so I knew, and it did, when I pulled her, it took us 6 months of school and then extra things that I did with her just to get her back on track with her, with nationally, what it would be if I pulled her from Terry and we went somewhere else, she would have been so far behind typically. So anyway, yeah, that's why I did that. It was not her fault. It was just because it's that no child left behind. And so we had kids who would not listen, who would not learn, and all they did was add adults to the classroom. They never addressed the issue. They brought the parents in, they brought the grandparents in, nothing was ever changed. And so within that year, not only was she behind with her multiplications, in an entire year, they spent 1 unit in social studies and 1 unit in science in the entire year.
Which is like, if you take like the Revolutionary War is broken up into like 2 or 3 units. You know, you have the initial lead up to the war of the colonialism, then you have a unit on the war, and then you have a unit on like the start of America. That's like, so you take one portion of that. That's all she learned in a
all
year.
year in 2 subjects. Plus, she didn't know her math. So when it's reading, writing, and arithmetic, that's an issue. And so anyway, there's a lot of things that we did. I remember one time, it was in Gavin's class. They were having the kids feel rocks.
That was my class? I don't think it was my class.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And so you would have to, they would feel a rock. They would be taken out of class, and they would feel a rock. And if the rock was smooth, or if the rock was jagged, or if the rock was rough, then they would say, how does this make you feel? And so this was what they were doing in class time. And so I went to the teacher, because Gavin came home and told me that they were feeling rocks.
The importance of asking your kid, what did you learn in school today?
I found a rock
and felt my emotions.
He named it Rocco.
So anyway, I went to the teacher and I said, listen, I'm like, he is not going to be feeling rocks. I'm like, he is designed to be reading, writing, and arithmetic. He's not being pulled for these sessions like this. I'm not, he can come home if that's what's going to happen. And so we had a conversation about that or whatever. And then there were other times that was during, they were doing all this testing, weird testing. They'd pull them out of school and test them. And there was supposedly data mining and all kinds of stuff that was going on with that. And so they were not your end of the year ACT, SAT, or even it wasn't even called that. It was called
NWST or something.
They were called assessment tests, but you got them back, and they would tell you what grade you were in or where you.
Oh yeah, I forgot about those.
Yeah,
those scared me.
Yeah, it wasn't this. They would take these tests, and you would never you wouldn't get to know what was going on or where you were ranking in different things. And so anyway, I would always pull Gavin and Riley for those tests. Well, they started tricking them, if they will. So they'd come back to class because there's only 2 days they could do it. And so I just pulled my kids for those 2 days, and they weren't allowed to go to school. But then what they would do is once they went back to school, without my knowledge, they would pull them out of class, put them in an individual room with a computer, and have to take these tests. And so I just told my kids, I'm like, it's an absolute no. If they pull you out of, if you have to take a test, like they had to take every test they took for their units, but if they pull you out of class to take a test, I'm like, you just simply say, call my mom. I'm not allowed to do this, call my mom. And so we had things that we had talked about, plus, of course, the principals, anything. There was a lot of stuff that went down with Riley's class. I went into a classroom just to find out what was going on. Different things. There was lots of things like that. They knew me. Even as far as during Common Core, Riley was learning fractions. Fractions are very easy to me. It's very, there is a not a system, but there's a procedure on how you multiply fractions that's super easy. You get the end result. And Riley came home one day, and she's drawing this picture.
I hated doing that too.
And she was having to draw and make 1/8, and then she have to draw 1/8, and then she have to draw 3/4, and they weren't fractions; they were pictures. And from these pictures, she had to get an answer. When what you do is you take your 3/4 to 8, you add them straight across. It's pretty simple how you figure that out. And so, 3/4 and 1/8 equals 7/8 when you just change your fractions. But she had to draw pictures. And so I'm like, Riley, no. I'm like, that's not how you do this. This is easy. This is how you do this. And so we were explaining, oh my goodness, the drama of, my teacher said I can't, And I mean, I'm like, that's enough. I'm like, this is how you're doing it. This is how you're doing it. And so we did it, even with issues. And then I went into the teacher the next day. I said, this is stupid. Like, this is how you figure out a fraction. At that time she was a 3rd grader. How is a 3rd grader going to draw and have equal parts and then figure out an 1/8 versus 3/4 comes up with 7/8 by 2 pictures that they can't even draw equally? Mm-hmm. I'm like, that is not ever going to work. And the teacher she was good, because I didn't come out mad, but I came on, I'm right, and I am the boss. I'm the boss of my kids, and right now that's what they're doing in the school system, is saying the parents have no rights. And my kids used to say, well, the teacher said. I don't care what the teacher said. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And I will go address the teacher. I'll talk to the teacher. But the fact is I am the boss of you, period. That is not up for debate. And so, anyway, I would go in, and I was fiery with my kids. I wasn't necessarily fiery with the teachers, but I would just say, listen, especially with Riley's, I'm like, here is the issue, and this is not how she's going to be taught. I'm going to teach her how to do fractions the right way. And this specific teacher it was her last year. She's like, I know. She's like, I'm this Common Core stuff, and she's like, we're not able to teach him the way we used to be able to teach him. She's like, this is my last year. I'm retiring. Basically, because it's a joke. It was a complete joke that they couldn't. She was a good teacher and had been in the teaching in the education for years, but yet was having to change how she taught in order to stay teaching, and basically it was just making them dumb.
Mm-hmm. The purpose behind that, the whole system. If you go back to what Rockefeller said, are you going to read that quote, Riley?
Yeah. Okay,
read it.
It's a quote by H.L. Mencken. He's a guy who basically helped found the education system. And what he said was, what is the purpose of industrial education? To fill the young of the species with knowledge and awaken their intelligence? Nothing could be further from the truth. The aim is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level, to breed and train a standardized citizenry. Oh my gosh.
Group of
Public
citizens.
education people. To put down dissent and originality. That is its aim in the United States, and that is its aim everywhere else.
See, this is, I'm glad I wanted you to talk about this stuff, because this is what people need to see is, the system has been set up by people who have wicked intent to get slaves for the system that they've set up. And what you did is you literally came against that. Now, we didn't do it in a way that was trying to bash the teacher or anything like that. We just knew something was wrong and we had to come against it. And now that we know what it is, that's why we're talking about it now, because people, you've got to know that you are the ones in charge. What's happening now in the school system is that they think because they've gone to college, they're smarter than you. They know how to raise your kid better than you do. And that's not how God set it up. That again is we are full on in the system of Baal, and that is pulled people away from the family unit. God designed the family. God designed you to run your family. God designed you to know what's going on in your family. God designed you to be able to know what's best for your family. And if you'll seek Him, He'll begin to show you these things like He did with us.
Right.
We went after those things because it just didn't set right. We can't do this. The education was wrong. You just went after the things that were wrong. Here in Romans 1:21, it says, because although they knew God, we could say America once knew God, they did not glorify Him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things, and so on and so forth. Well, then it says, and God also let... Anyway.
That's exactly what they do. They made God into something of the past, an old relic.
Right. And so now they've become gods. Like they are the ones in the system now that run it, and they are the gods on the thrones. And they're telling you, peasant, you don't know any better because I'm the educated one. And so if you've got to learn to understand that God resides on the inside of you. If you think something's wrong, you have to go talk about it with the system, the people that are in the system. And they're going to look down on you. They're going to think... Not all of them, but as the system, okay? The system itself. You'll be able to know if someone's there to help you or not. And some of them are flat captured by the system themselves. Sure. But this is why, as a parent, to get involved in what your kids are doing.
Right. Because the system itself, it was implemented by our forefathers, and it was designed as a good thing.
Right.
Because back in the older times, public education wasn't people
Originally,
weren't educated
you were
at all.
educated by your parents. The mother was the educator.
Right. But again, back then, low income, you
Right.
basically had to work just to survive, and the kids didn't learn anything above a third grade level, even from their parents. So the public education system was established originally as a way for the parents to be able to provide for the family, keep the family afloat, and allow the kids to still progress in their education and further their family. It was designed with family in mind. But now we're way past that point where if parents work, both parents work, it's usually not because they have to, it's because they want the boat or the next car or whatever, and kids are all just sent to the public education system, and they go down,
Right.
Whereas if you spent any time with your parents, you would learn way more than you would have way back then, and that's because the system is broken.
It was
and we're
hijacked.
not here.
It was hijacked.
It was hijacked, and we're not here to tell you, homeschool your kids because
No.
the public school system is terrible. No, we're telling you need to change the system,
The
and
whole
there's
thing has
ways
to-
that you have to do it.
Yes, the whole thing has to be redone, and each person has to do their part in doing it. That's why we're talking about we're talking about homeschool. We did both homeschool and public school because that's what best fit us.
Right.
But maybe you're a person who's just going to go public education all the way. That's great, but be involved.
Right, yes,
Because
be
the
involved.
other thing that happened, and read that other
Talk
quote.
to your kids.
Talking about by John Dewey,
The one
I
about
don't
the public schools
Christian churches
occupied.
influence.
Yeah. How
Just
they're-
read the quote.
It's by John Dewey. He's also another person who helped found. He was one of the founders of the public education system as well. It says, if the public schools can keep the children occupied throughout the day with sports after school and homework in the evening, the parents will have less than an hour a day with their children, and the families and Christian churches' influence over them could be broken in about a generation.
Isn't that the truth?
It is true.
So-
this is one of the founders. This gives you the foundation of what they were thinking.
And what started out as, and they even taught biblical standards.
Yep.
They
The
used
Bible
to-
was used as the spelling book, basically.
That what started out as just trying to get kids to know basic math, even just so they can and know the biblical principles to live a moral life, turned into breaking a generation away from all of that.
Well, what's interesting and how you can see, like we've talked about earlier, how Baal leads to Ishtar leads to Moloch, and everything works together, especially in the education system. You can see it because that's where they're going to go after first. Because if you take the generation, you take the nation in just a decade, basically. And what I think is crazy is from even where we went to school in the younger years, now we're way past that. Like, I listened to this song, and it's called Where We Are by Kyle Hume, I think is his name. And it's a really interesting song because it's a perfect window into my generation's viewpoint on the world. Because, it talks about, we were taught the world was going to end before we even got old enough to do anything.
Would you explain that? Because when you said that, that's the first time I had ever heard that. I thought you were
I
joking.
thought I talked. No,
Yeah.
because I had talked to you in third grade.
Well,
I was a
maybe.
third grader. We were reading something in science or whatnot, and they were saying that this happened in third grade and then in seventh grade. Again, I heard about it after the year I'd gone back to public school was seventh grade, and so in third grade they were saying how the sun is going to burn out and you're going to have 5 minutes of darkness before everybody dies and all this stuff, and they didn't tell you how many years it's going to burn out, but they were saying it's going to burn out whether it's your kids or your grandkids, and that basically the world is going to end because the sun's going to burn out. And I remember going home and talking to mom about that, well, what's why are we here if the sun's going to burn out, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, God would not create the sun for it to burn out before he came back. Why would he make a sun and then kill everybody on earth
Right.
because it would burn out?
Right.
And you think about it, when that causes fear in a child, you wonder where behavioral problems come, in not only in school but at home too, because it's fear generated. It
Right.
comes from fear. They're afraid they're going to die. What's the point?
Yeah.
All these problems begin to stir at home and in school. Well, then what? Let's medicate them.
And it
Well,
was
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm gonna get to that because I have a.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm gonna wrap this all up for you. So, obviously, okay, I'm gonna give you the speed run version, but listen quick, okay? So in 2000, like the year 2000, Y2K, right before, like 3 years before I was born, that was a big thing. That would be like I think 1995 is the start of the Gen Z generation, okay? So Y2K was the first, like, the world is going to end event other than, like, probably the Cold War, right?
Okay, let me pause here because
Okay.
you're catching from 2000, but that happened even before that. There was always fear of nuclear war as soon as the nuclear bomb. Now we even were taught in school up into the 80s that get under the desk. Then they had things like the space shuttle exploding, and there was a constant fear of
Yeah,
destruction.
but we didn't hear the Earth was ending.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
every
the-
generation is a
that's
new
his
fear. I
point.
feel
The
like.
Cold War was probably the
Nuclear war.
first generation where they were like,
Well,
the
yes.
world could possibly
Yes.
end.
Yes, nuclear
Right.
war was the big thing.
Right.
That was
But
going to for our
I
generation.
went all the way through school, and I never had the under the desk nuclear issues. We had fire drills.
Right, precisely.
And I
Me.
never. I know you're older, but the reality is, the reality is what floored me is I had never heard this. I was never taught, and he was actually taught in
right.
school.
Right. Okay. So now up
Yeah.
to 2000.
So
Y2K.
now Y2K, obviously, computers are going to crash because whatever, and the world's going to. And I wasn't alive for that, but you guys get it.
Yeah, they even said prisoners are going to get out of prison automatically because the computers are going to quit working.
And now it's AI.
Right.
Anyway,
fear.
keep going.
And then now you get to remember the Mayan calendar thing, 2012. That was when I was like, okay, what? I would have been 9 years old. Probably would have been what, first, second grade, something like that.
No,
Yeah, second grade.
like second, third grade.
It
Whatever.
doesn't matter.
Point is, grade school, 2012, the world was supposed to end because the Mayan calendar would run out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, well, crap. Then
I
fast
remember
forward
that actually.
8 years, 2020, right? 2020, COVID hits.
Everybody's going to die.
Everybody's going to die. Oh, no, the world's in a pandemic, and nobody's going to survive. Basically, every year that we were in the sun thing, World War III.
Global warming.
Global warming was huge. Every stage of our education there was some way that the world was going to end before, like Social Security. We were never going to have Social Security when we got older. Every stage of our education, we were taught that the world was going to end before we could do anything about it. And where that springs from Moloch is, well, death,
Death.
And from that point, you're like, well, what's the point of life?
Right.
That's where the behavioral problems come in. Even if it's not conscious, like, oh, the world's going to end. Why do I care about anything? I'm just going to do it. It develops the mentality in the kid.
It does.
And so from the very early ages where you just hear the sun is going to explode to the older ages where you hear, the Mayan calendar is going to end, to Social Security, to your future is insecure, to 2020 where that's a life-threatening problem. Every single stage you're put in with fear to the point of, well, like now it's even memed about how much that Gen Z and Gen Alpha don't even care about world-ending events anymore. Like aliens were supposedly announced and we're all just like, blow it off in a week.
Right.
Drones are dropping in New Jersey. Nobody cares.
Right.
Nobody cares because we've grown up in a generation of, oh, the world's going to end. I guess I'm just going to live the way I can live until I can't.
Right.
And
what
that is where the behavioral problems
messed up.
spring from.
So much wrong
because
with
they
that.
have no future. They have no hope.
no hope. No hope.
They have no reason to live in a way that benefits humanity or even themselves because I'm just going to live in which way it pleases me because I'm going to die eventually anyway and no one's going to care because there's no history.
Right. And what your kids need to know is that God formed them before they were ever formed in the womb. And He has a future and a hope planned for them.
Precisely.
What this system is telling us about total destruction and annihilation is a lie.
Yeah.
It's a flat out lie. And that's why I know we took a big, long, loop to say we've got to do something to change it all.
Yeah.
And it takes the individual. It takes you doing something, getting active somewhere, talking to your kids, making sure they know the truth.
That is the most important part. I mean, yes, involve yourself in the school board system and get involved in the system, but get involved in your kids first, for crying out loud. Okay, don't care about what happens to John Doe Johnson over there. Figure out what's going on in your kid's life. Figure like if mom wouldn't have again. she didn't hear about the sun was going to explode until I told her last year or 2012. You know.
Well, she did.
And
She
she's
just
one that
forgot.
actually was involved in your life. How much is your kid learning from your teachers from their teachers that you have no idea about?
And yeah, that's just the importance of staying in contact with your kids and asking them from a young age. Because if you don't get them from the young age, asking them, hey, what'd you learn in school? And sometimes kids are like, oh, this, and you have to sometimes pry it out of them. But if you don't start young, you're not going to get it when they're a teenager.
No.
And they're learning about things they shouldn't be learning about.
Right.
And the importance of how mom was like, well, God created the earth, he created the sun, and he's not going to create it to burn out and kill us all. And that carried over into 7th grade when we had a whole seminar about global warming. I remember sitting in the cafeteria and they're showing you this big video about how global warming is going to take out the world. And I'm like sitting there like, this is stupid. Why did they take me out of class to teach me about something that ain't happening? Because God didn't create the world to overheat and die. First we're running out of heat. Now we have too much heat. Like,
Right.
well, you don't make sense. And something that, because what it sticks out to me is the fact that we're put into a system at such a young age. Like 5 and 6 is about kindergarten age, but sometimes you're put in even younger in pre-K, like what is that, 4 or 5, and then even before that, ages like 1 to 3, you're in daycare, because parents are so occupied on working and this and that and whatever, and sometimes single parents don't have
Can't be helped.
like they can't be helped because they might not have family to take them to or whatever. But the thing is that's the most moldable time of a kid's life is from that young age, and you're putting them through the school system 8 hours a day because during that time. And what it makes me think of is kind of like in pottery, you have the clay, and it's very moldable. It's wet, it's sticky, it gets on everything. But you can make it any shape you want. You can make it hollow, you can make it solid, you can make it a pot, you can make it a dog, you can make it whatever. And that's kind of what a kid is in those young ages. They're like that clay. Very moldable. You can do whatever you like. They will form whatever shape like the potter's hands do. And after so long, the clay hardens and cures, and you can't move it unless you break it. So they're now getting into the teenage years where they're not really very moldable anymore. They have these set beliefs and they have these set things in them, and they're all jacked up because of what the school system did when they were younger. And I think it's so important why parents need to be in contact with them, because they can readjust those fixings when they come back home. Oh, what'd you learn? I learned the world was going to end. Well, that's not true. God made the earth. You have a purpose, like whatever. And the fact that parents don't do that anymore. They are like, oh, hey, how was your day? Good. Okay, good. Go play.
Yeah.
Have some fun. Whatever. And they're put through 12 plus years of school being molded into something that's not good. They're learning things that aren't supposed to be learned. And this quote, again, from one of the founders, Horace Mann is what his name is. He's another one of the education people. He said, "We who are engaged in the sacred cause of education are entitled to look upon all parents as having given hostages to our cause." You're giving your kid over as a hostage. They're learning things that they shouldn't be learning at such a young age that aren't even true, and putting fear in them, putting wrong beliefs in them, whatever, at such a young age. And I know God's the ultimate potter. He can make new, and I wanted to read this scripture. It's, where is it at? Second Corinthians 5:17 says, "Now if anyone is enfolded into Christ, he's become an entirely new person. All that is related to the old order has vanished. Behold, everything is fresh and new." I'm not saying that just because your kid has gone through 12 years of school plus that they're now this jacked up looking pot that can't be changed.
Right.
That's not the case. God can renew minds. He can renew things. He can fix things that no one else could do.
But now it's going to have to be a break choice.
Well, and that's the hard part about what comes next. in order for change to happen, what does that mean for the individual? Well, basically what it's going to mean areas of sacrifice and areas of change.
Right.
You know, like if you're going to be able to spend time with your kid, maybe you've got the giant mortgage and 2 or 3 vehicle payments and a boat payment and a camper payment, so you're always stressed and you don't have time to ask your kid about school, or they don't have time to spend with you because you're always gone or whatever. What it's going to take is going to take some sacrifice and doing without some of those things and getting rid of debt and getting rid of those things, in order to make the changes necessary. It's not always easy. And what we're talking about, there's going to be some struggle in some of it, but here's the thing. We're trying to get away from a system that was created by people that are creating slaves to keep a society in check.
Yeah.
For example, look at this first guy mentioned, H.L. Mencken. A couple of words that he used in here. He talked about what's the purpose of the industrial education? To fill the young of the species. He didn't even call them children. He said species. And then he goes on and he says, so to breed and train a standard, breed and train. I mean, those are terms that look at people as cattle.
Yeah.
So
look at this. The education system has not changed at all in 110 years. This is a picture of the 1915 classroom and a modern classroom. You see that in the black and white?
the
Yeah,
black and
there's-
white.
And I'll
Show
put
it on
it
the
up on
screen.
on the podcast.
Yeah.
But the black and white picture from 1915,
Then and now. Huh.
which is right after the Board of Education or the GEB was created, like 7 years after. Because it's designed, you go to school 8 hours a day, you sit in a desk, you work, just like a cubicle. You're designed to be a worker. You're not designed to be a thinker, even a person that's designed to improve society. You're just meant to be a part of it, a pawn, a used piece. Cattle, something to be used, farmed, and which makes sense about if you go on some deeper things about it. But that is the thing about education. It's not, you're not supposed to, you're not just supposed to make something that you can use for your own advantage. The education system is supposed to be something that improves with every generation. You're supposed to teach people what you know so that they can go out and they can improve the lives of the next generation. And that's why things haven't changed a whole lot in the last 50 years.
Right.
You know, I even look at like you think about costumes and clothing, right? So I saw this video like last night. You look at clothes from the 70s and clothes from the 80s are totally different, right? You have the big hair, you have the colors, you have the bell bottoms, all that stuff. You get to the 90s, there's a little bit of change, like it looks like a transition period between the 80s and 2000s, but from 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and even now 2024, looks are basically exactly the same. That's 4 decades when you had a change from 70s to 80s. Mm-hmm. That's huge, that the fact that there's no change at all, because the education system is not meant to produce people that can think for themselves or think creatively in any way. They're just meant to mold to the system. Like education, if the public school education does not teach them something that is like designed to further society or further their family, it should not be taught in schools. For instance, I take science, for example. Science is a very, I want to say sketchy subject. It's a required subject, but it's a sketchy subject. Like math, English, spelling, those are obvious things that you have to function in a society. Science, you do need some basic knowledge of things like, oh, this is how photosynthesis works, blah, 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 blah. But then you get into like high school and whatever, and you have like biology, you have theories of evolution and creation. Those are the two prevailing theories or whatever, but they teach you evolution. They tell you, oh, there is these two things, but we're going to assume that evolution is true so that we have something to teach you. That should never, ever, ever be the case in an education system, because now that is taking something that is theoretical, unproven, and teaching it as fact. Whether or not you say it's fact or not, if you teach it, it's presented as fact. You don't present something that is a guess. Mm-hmm. You teach something that's true, and you let them figure it out for the rest. That's why you get generations that don't change at all. because they don't go past the theories. They're like, okay, that must be true enough. We'll deal with it.
Right.
I think it's important as a parent, no matter the age, that you treat that as a God-given responsibility.
Right.
Because like you said, species breed and train. It's a cattle movement. It's just a process to get meat in the next generation. Like it's just an ongoing, this is what you do, this is what you get, this is what you do, this is what you get. And the reality is there are giftings and talents and each member of the body's been placed exactly where he has you. And if you don't take the time to talk to your kids, like we've talked about, and it is intentional, it can be exasperating. Like she said, I heard the sun was moving or burning out. I've heard the sun burning out. I had not heard the earth was ending in 2012. But the reality is even though that's such a bogus thing to me, because I never heard that.
Yeah, you didn't hear it until you were a fully formed pot.
Yeah, exactly. And so, to me, blowing those kinds of things off, I mean, I heard a statistic that 3 out of 4 faith-based kids, like they've been raised in church, 3 out of 4 will leave their faith in college.
That's 75%.
Of churched kids. I was talking to somebody who took, in college, they took classes, biblical classes, and biblical classes were taught by an atheist. I mean, that's messed up. It's completely messed up that someone who doesn't even believe in God is teaching you on who God is. So the reality is we have got to stay connected. And changing education is going to start with changing your own.
Yeah.
It is getting involved. I'm so thankful for those people who are called to the office and to the mountain of influence that's education and that's government that get in and help change the laws. But I know personally I'm not someone who's going to be in that mode to change the laws. But I know 2 people who I did have a hand in changing and shaping the views and shaping how they see God and even how they see a teacher. And it was by me saying, when they would come home and saying it wrong, no, that's not right. And making sure that they knew. I mean, to the point where Riley came home one year and she said that, how did she say that? The government was in charge. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, whoa. We were having dinner. I said, no. The government's not in charge. Yes, they are. They're the boss. We have to do what the government says. No. We, the people, are the boss. Mm-hmm. I'm the boss of the government. She would not believe me for nothing because of something. Now she believes me. But it's because when something is said and it creates a rut in them, we have to give them the opposing view to jump them out of that rut. They might end back in that rut, but at least they had some air.
Mm-hmm. That's how you shift culture.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's crazy because that really is what the school system is doing, is it's teaching you not how to think, but what to think. Mm-hmm. And it's basically taking you from having an ideal of your own and what your parents have instilled into you to having an idea of what the school teaches you. I have one more quote that I want to share. It's also one of the founders of the school system, and it's insane. I think it's Johann Fitch or something. I don't know how to say his middle name, or maybe second last name, however you say it. But he says, education should aim at destroying free will so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished.
Yeah, it's so messed up.
Yeah. And there's so much fat on the education system. So much fat. I mean, you look at, like, even just basic high school, forgetting college, because college is a whole nother gambit. But high school, I think I was required, you're required 26 points to graduate.
Credits. Mm-hmm.
Credits. And 12, 14 of them were electives?
There was a lot of electives, yeah.
That's over half of extra classes. Not that any of those things are bad, but I was required to take classes that aren't necessary. Like, if everybody didn't take that class, nobody would have cared. I was required to take 14 of those credits to graduate. If you don't need those to function in the world, they might be beneficial or help you figure out where you want to do with your life, but it's not required. The only thing that should be required in an education system is, like you said, basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's 4 hours of a day where you have math, English, and a reading and composition class, and then maybe a fourth class that I can't think, or science, maybe a science class.
Social studies.
So social studies or
Even
history class, which they
penmanship.
usually
Oh
split.
my
Because like
gosh.
I think you're required you have to take an English class every year and a math class every year, but then you have to take 3 years of a science class and 3 years and 2 years of a
Social
like a
studies.
social studies class. So you can cut it back to where not only is your time not wasted because you don't have all this extra classes, you can cut the school hours for children across the board from 8 to noon or 8 to 1 without a lunch break. That's 3-4 extra hours with family. You don't need all that extra fat. And why aren't we doing it? Because the school system is trying to program people for this 8 to 5 schedule, 9 to 5 schedule, where you're learning not to be a critical thinker or even somebody that's a productive member of society, but a product for society.
Product for society. And that goes back to, what the word says. The Bible says that before he created us in the womb, he knew us.
Yeah.
He sanctified us and ordained us. There's something that God has for each individual in life to accomplish and do. The giftings and callings on your life are irrevocable. God never takes them back. And the education system is designed to dumb that down and take that away from you so that you're not only being a productive citizen for your country, but now you're not even fulfilling what God created you to do in the first place.
Yeah. Let
And
the
so-
kids figure out their own calling.
Yeah, we just got to make some changes as parents and as a society. We've got to get back to God, start talking to God. God, what would you have me do? How would you have me make whatever changes? Where can I get involved? Do you want me on the mountain of education? Am I supposed to be at home? Am I supposed to be more at home as a mom or a dad or however this works? You need to start talking to God and say, okay, God, what can I do to make changes in this?
That's where it all begins. That's
Yep.
how we shift
At
the
home.
culture.
Yep.
Well, thank you all for joining us on this very special education podcast of Breaking Woke. We will see y'all next time. And don't forget, your test will be on Friday.
Thanks for watching, guys. See ya.
Bye-bye.